Hey y'all, how you doing? I hope you're well. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about self-worth, of not feeling worthy and how to move into self-worth. And I want to put it in a little bit of context because this is a theme that I would say pretty much most human beings experience. And part of it is because we live in a society that kind of produces a not good enough sense of self, right? So let me first place worth in the context that we're currently in our society. We are measured by what we do. So if you notice, like, old forms of education, actually it's still going on if in mainstream education, but old forms of parenting that are, like, let's say, not conscious or conscientious, you often hear good girl, good boy, bad girl, bad boy, you know? So what does that teach us? That teaches us that we are only valued by what we do, and that what we do is dependent on the feedback that we're getting from someone else, either their validation or their disapproval. So our worth is outside of us. It's dependent on what we do, and it's dependent on if that person likes what we're doing or if they don't like what we're doing, which means our worth is really, it's like volatile, right? Because it's ever changing and it's totally out of our control. So this whole society and forms of education and parenting that are measuring you constantly by what you do. Did you get a good grade? Did you pass? Did you fail? The pressure of it is that we are identifying ourselves with what we're doing. The difference, the little like tweak, is you are inherently and innately good enough. Like, you're born worthy and good enough, period. Right? What we do, however, can be evolved. Like, sometimes our behavior does need a little bit of working on, right? Like if we're walking around like being mean to people or being snooty or whatever, or judging, like, yeah, that requires some evolution. It requires some attention, right? But to attach and identify our worth with what we're doing means that our worth is constantly going like this. Because let's say one day let's say you measure your worth by the kind of exercise that you do, just as a really simple example. Maybe one day your body's tired and you don't perform as well. So what happens after you feel, oh God, I feel terrible about myself, right? Or maybe you had a project at work or at school or whatever it is, and it didn't go to the degree that you would have liked it. It didn't get the approval that you would have liked to have from it. And so you come away feeling bad about who you are, right? Or you performed something and you messed up a note or whatever it is. What it does is it creates no room for failure, no room for making mistakes. And so that adds pressure of perfectionism, and all of it is wrapped in, I'm only good enough if I do it perfectly. I'm only good enough if I succeed. I'm only good enough if by society's standards, I've ticked all the boxes. I'm married. I have children. I'm not divorced. I'm making lots of money. Do you see how it's completely dependent on the outside, right? Whereas if you're worthy, but maybe there's something of like, oh, I could show up better in that moment. I could have communicated that with more skill and with more compassion or whatever it is. It also affects how we relate to ourselves, because if you're trying something new, like, look at a kid that wants to try something new, but is coming from that I'm only as good as what I do, and that maybe that perfectionism comes in, then if they don't get it right away, what do they do? They feel terrible about themselves and they go, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. Because what's happening is that their whole being is being wrapped up in it. So how do we move from the feeling of lack of self-worth? And I say the feeling because you are inherently worthy. Nobody can take that away from you, right? So the feeling of I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy, or I have low self-worth, or I have low self-esteem. And how do we move that into I'm worthy. I'm worthy, I'm good enough. Doesn't mean perfect. There's no such thing as perfect. Like, we're learning, right? We're evolving, we're experiencing. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to mess up, right? So how we move into self-worth is by accepting all parts of ourselves. Every part. The parts you don't like, the parts you're ashamed of, the parts that you want to get rid of. all parts need to feel accepted and included. And that's ultimately what self-love is. Self-love isn't, it's great if you go out and do loads of therapy or loads of whatever, and you come out and you feel like, oh, I'm a positive person, and, I have an idea of who I am, like, and therefore that's self-love. Self-love comes out as a byproduct, you could say, of every single moment that something comes up in you and you go, that's okay. It's okay. I accept myself. I love myself. What doesn't matter if you do something that you're like, oh, that was embarrassing, or oh, I feel ashamed of that, or God, I could have done that better, whatever it is. It's like softening the judgment and transmuting judgment into self-acceptance. Like, learn from something, evolve through something if you want to, but without berating yourself and without excluding parts of you, right? Self-love is naturally there when you accept yourself without judgment. And when you accept yourself without judgment, you'll recognize that, like, your worth is in the chair that you're sitting in right now, right? That is the backdrop. That is what's holding you. And so, feeling worthy, of course, there's going to be inner work that you might need to do, like with your inner child, because maybe there's this connotation where your inner child is still seeking approval from your parent, right? And so therefore it's seeking approval from whoever the authoritative figure is. And if we're, the moment that we kind of export or delegate our worth to someone else and say, unless you tell me I'm good enough, unless you tell me you love me, unless you tell me I'm doing a good job, there's the void, there's the emptiness, right? Because we're waiting. And then what happens is that brings us into kind of convoluted behavior, because sometimes we're seeking for it. And so we're kind of driving it. The motivation, our behavior is driving, like, do you validate me? Do you accept me? Am I good enough? Did I do that well? And it creates this real disempowerment, right? Whereas worth, is okay with whatever happens, because its identity isn't threatened, right? It's not threatened. It can reflect. And when we're in worth, we don't take things so personal, right? It doesn't mean that things don't affect us, but we don't jump to the conclusion first right away that it's like, they said that because they don't like me, or whatever it triggers, whatever our story is. Often what I will say with clients is, what if you began by not taking it personal? Because when we don't take it personal, we can see things as they are. We can see things through as clear a lens, as objective a lens as possible. It's impossible to have it be 100% clear and 100% objective, but as clear as possible. And when we're looking through a clear lens, we can either see, oh, actually, this isn't my stuff. They're triggered. Something is going on for them. Or actually, you know what I did, I can take self-responsibility for that, but I'm not getting into the identification of, like, I didn't say that so with as much skill as I would have liked. And so that was the consequence, was that person felt bad, or they felt triggered, or whatever. If I took it personal, I would be saying, oh God, it would be triggering. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not liked. I can't get it right. Whatever it is, there's a whole story that opens up with that, right? Whereas if I'm coming from worth and I don't take it personal, I can just see things as they are. Okay, I could have communicated that better. Okay, how do I hold myself accountable lovingly? How do I take self-responsibility, and how do I evolve my behavior? We can fine-tune our behavior 100%, right? So does that make sense, the differences? So you kind of have the track, let's say there were two tracks. The track of a lack of self-worth is when we are identifying ourselves with what we're doing, and we're measuring ourselves with what we're doing, and it's dependent on the external feedback. And then we take everything personal. We might get more triggered. We might get more defensive. We might go into whatever our coping mechanisms are. It could be to hide, to make ourselves smaller, to make ourselves bigger and become more, attacking, or whatever it is. There's like a multitude of responses, right? And there's always a reason for our behavior. So our behavior deserves curiosity and compassion, right? It doesn't deserve judgment, because we can't work with anything. If we feel judged, we're not going to change, because we're under attack, right? The other track of self-worth is I'm good enough as I am. I'm good enough as I am. I'm loved as I am. I'm worthy as I am. And then something might come up and I can look at my behavior. I can look at the situation kind of from a more broader perspective and a bird's eye view. And without taking it personal and without being so triggered, I can really look at, well, what was my part in this? Right? And then also, how do I create, like, our world needs a hell of a lot of help when it comes to conflict resolution. Like, people just get stuck in the conflict. There's no resolution, right? We can't see resolution if we're triggered and we're taking everything personal and we're in right and wrong and we're in judgment and we're valuing people by their opinion, by their beliefs, their religious beliefs, their political beliefs, all of these things, right? There's a lot of stipulations. There's a lot of rules, and it's kind of like, I'm right, you're wrong, and everyone is in that kind of very black and white argument, right? So coming from a place of worth, we can zoom out a little bit. We can become a little bit more neutral, and we can see things for what they are, as they are. So to simplify it, I would say when you're coming from a lack of self-worth, you're just not accepting yourself. And when you're coming from self-worth, you're accepting yourself. Doesn't mean that you can't evolve what you're thinking, feeling, experiencing, how you're behaving. But the base has to be, I accept myself. I accept myself. I even accept that this is a part of me that I would like to work on, because actually it's not allowing me to be in the vast largest bigness, of who I really am. Right? We do have patterns and behaviors and habits. We're habitual creatures, right? So there are things that, even I will be stuck in a pattern and I'll be like, oh, okay, I can really recognize that I'm in that pattern. But I'm not going into the story of like, oh God, therefore I'm something's wrong with me and I'm a terrible person, or, God, nobody's going to love me. That's the whole story of I'm not good enough and I'm not worthy enough and I'm not lovable enough. I'm not something enough, right? So you can take things and go, okay, how do I want to work with that so that I feel liberated from this pattern, liberated from this habit that isn't serving me, right? So I hope that's helpful to just the first step is to recognize, how am I identifying myself with what I'm doing and judging myself as either being a good girl or a bad girl, a good boy or a bad boy, and just get out of that terminology completely. We've been taught through praise and punishment, and that again solidifies you are only as good as what you do, and the thing is if you feel worthy and you feel good enough as a person, you love yourself, you're going to naturally do good things because you're going to be in your heart. We tend to do bad things when we're in pain or when we're scared. And when we're in pain and when we're scared and we're not actually taking care of ourselves, when we're abandoning ourselves, and maybe we learned that when we were younger, we were rejected, we were abandoned, we were neglected. And so then we retaliate and we act out more, right? But because the underlying yearning is like, what do we all want? We want to be loved. We want to be accepted for who we are, who we uniquely are, not who we should be because society tells us we should be that. Nobody likes that. Nobody really, truly likes that, right? What we need is a society that is circular, that says you get to be you, who you uniquely are, as like that unique drop of the ocean. And when you are uniquely you, the whole becomes so much more vibrant, so much more powerful and empowered, right? Like, homogenization and slavery in that sense doesn't ever produce anything that's vibrant and alive. What creates something that's vibrant and alive is when every piece of that, it's like every cell of our body needs to be healthy for our body to be healthy. If a group of cells are not healthy or not happy, then dis-ease arises, right? So everything is interconnected. Everything is interconnected. That's a lot. I hope that's been helpful, but just to like really break it down, you're either accepting yourself or you're not accepting yourself. And it's okay to not like something about yourself, but don't try to get rid of it. That part that you don't like means that it needs loving attention. And through loving attention, you can alchemize and transmute it into something that actually serves you. Because a lot of the times our limiting beliefs are not serving us. They might be protecting us. They might be helping us cope with a deeper vulnerability and a deeper wound, but it's actually not serving us at the end of the day. We just get stuck in victimization. So I hope that's helpful. As always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. Bye.